So, we've all been there. It's the middle of February, maybe March, and that shiny New Year's resolution to hit the gym 5 days a week is already gathering dust. Or maybe it's that promise you made to yourself for the 10th time to finally quit smoking or to stop snacking on chips while watching Netflix at 11 p.m. And yet, there you are, hand in the bag, wondering why you just can't seem to stick to it. It's frustrating. It feels like a personal failure, like you just don't have the grit. But think about this for a second. Have you ever driven home from work, pulled into your driveway, and suddenly realized you don't remember a single moment of the trip? You navigated traffic, stopped at red lights, maybe even signaled a turn, all while your mind was completely elsewhere. Or maybe you've picked up your phone just to check the time, and suddenly you've been doom scrolling for 45 minutes, completely entranced. That is the feeling of being on autopilot. And it's not just a figure of speech. It's actually a very specific neurological process. Charles Duhigg, the author of The Power of Habit, describes this as your brain going into a chunking mode, basically your basal ganglia taking over to save energy. It's efficient, but it can feel incredibly powerless when it's working against you.
We tend to beat ourselves up over this. We blame our lack of willpower. We tell ourselves we're just lazy or weak or unmotivated. But what if that's the wrong diagnosis entirely? What if the guilt you're feeling is misplaced? Here is the real question I want you to consider as we dive into this book. What if you aren't lazy, but just programmed incorrectly? In the next segment, we're going to look at a man who lost his entire short-term memory. He couldn't even tell you his own age, but who somehow managed to teach science exactly how that programming works.
That specific distinction between being lazy and simply running on a faulty script is the foundation of everything we are about to discuss. It shifts the burden from your character to your biology, and biology is something we can manage. Welcome to The Last Read, Books for Your Ears, Wisdom for Your Life. Today, we are dissecting Charles Duhigg's modern classic, The Power of Habit. This isn't just a collection of tips on how to floss more or check your phone less. It is a deep dive into the neurology of free will. We are going to explore a concept Duhigg identifies as the habit loop, a neurological pattern that governs almost everything you do, from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep.
We are also going to uncover the golden rule of habit change. It is a principle so fundamental that it has been used by marketing executives to sell toothpaste to an entire nation, and by NFL coaches to turn a losing team into Super Bowl champions. By the end of this episode, you will have the code to reprogram your life.
Before we get to that code, make sure you hit that subscribe button now. We are going to provide you with a toolkit for a better life, and you really don't want to miss it. If you want to dive into the research yourself, you can find a link to the book right in the show description. Now, to understand the science, we first have to understand the source. Most books on behavior come from psychologists or self-help gurus, but The Power of Habit comes from a very different perspective, specifically that of an investigative journalist.
This is Charles Duhigg. He isn't a guru sitting on a mountaintop. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the New York Times. And that distinction matters because it defines how this book was written. Duhigg didn't just sit in a room and theorize about willpower. He treated the subject of habits like a massive investigative story. To write this book, he read hundreds of scientific papers and interviewed more than 300 people. We're talking about a list that includes neuroscientists looking at brain scans in high-tech laboratories, CEOs of major corporations like Alcoa and Starbucks, NFL coaches trying to win the Super Bowl, and even gamblers inside casinos. His goal was to understand the mechanics of why we do what we do. And because he's a journalist at heart, he has this incredible ability to turn dry, complex science into gripping stories. He takes you from the boardrooms of Procter & Gamble, where executives are panicking because their new air freshener is failing,
to the front lines of the civil rights movement, showing you that the mechanics of habit are the same everywhere. Through all those interviews and all that research, Duhigg found a common denominator. He discovered that whether you are a smoker trying to quit, a CEO trying to turn around a Fortune 500 company, or a quarterback trying to read a defense, your brain is relying on the same simple three-step structure. He calls it the habit loop. So, how does this loop actually work? Well, Duhigg breaks it down into a neurological cycle that happens in 3 distinct parts. And once you see them, you start noticing them everywhere. First, there's the cue. This is the trigger. It's that little spark that tells your brain to go into automatic mode and which habit to use. It could be anything, a specific time of day, a certain emotional state, a location, or even the buzz of your phone in your pocket. Next comes the routine. This is the behavior itself. It's the action you take, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. And finally, there's the reward. This is the payoff, the reason your brain remembers this loop in the first place. It's that spike of satisfaction or relief you feel afterwards. Let's look at a really common example that Duhigg himself struggled with. He calls it the mid-afternoon slump. You know the feeling. It's about 3:30 in the afternoon, you're at work, and suddenly you feel a bit tired or bored. That's your cue. So what do? You get up, walk to the cafeteria, and buy a chocolate chip cookie. That walk and that purchase, that's the routine. Then you eat the cookie while chatting with some colleagues. You feel a little sugar rush, you get a break from work, and you get to socialize. That is the reward. Your brain loves this because it's efficient. Duhigg explains that our brains are constantly looking for ways to save effort. There's a primal part of your brain called the basal ganglia. Think of it as the older, more primitive cousin to the prefrontal cortex, which handles the complex thinking. The basal ganglia stores these automatic behaviors so the rest of your brain can essentially go to sleep or focus on other things. It happens with our technology too. You hear a ding on your smartphone. That's a cue. Almost without thinking, you pick it up and check Instagram. That's the routine. You see a few likes or a funny video, and you get a tiny hit of dopamine. That's the reward. Over time, this loop, cue, routine, reward, becomes more and more automatic. The cue and reward become intertwined until a powerful sense of anticipation emerges. But here is the catch. Simply knowing the 3 steps isn't quite enough to change a habit. Duhigg found that there is actually a hidden engine driving this whole cycle. It's something that happens in the brain before the routine even starts. A specific neurological mechanism that powers the loop and makes it stick.
That engine? It's craving. See, a habit doesn't just happen because you have a cue and a reward. It happens because your brain starts to anticipate the reward the moment it sees the cue. It creates a neurological itch, a craving that demands to be scratched. To explain this, we have to go back to the early 1900s and look at a man named Claude Hopkins. Now, you might not know his name, but you know his work. Hopkins was an advertising genius, the madman of his day. One day, an old friend approached him with a new business idea, a minty, frothy toothpaste called Pepsodent. At the time, this was a terrible business proposition. Hardly anyone in America brushed their teeth. It wasn't a social norm. It was actually kind of a rarity. But Hopkins, being the gambler he was, he took the job. He needed a trigger to sell the product, so he dug through dental textbooks until he found a reference to the naturally occurring mucin plaques on teeth, which he famously rebranded as the film. You might have heard the ads. Just run your tongue across your teeth. You'll feel a film.
That was the cue. The routine was brushing with Pepsodent. And the reward? A beautiful film-free smile. And it worked. Within a decade, Pepsodent was one of the best-selling goods in the world, and toothbrushing became a daily ritual for more than half the American population. But here is the fascinating part. Hopkins wasn't the first guy to say, brush your teeth to make them pretty. Other toothpaste had tried that and failed. So what made Pepsodent different?
It wasn't the cleaning power, it was the ingredients. Pepsodent contains citric acid and mint oil. These ingredients are actually mild irritants. They create a cool, tingling sensation on your tongue and gums. That tingle, that was the secret key. When people forgot to brush, they didn't just miss having clean teeth, they missed the tingle. They missed that specific physical sensation. Their mouths didn't feel clean without it. Duhigg explains that this created a neurological craving. The film cue didn't just remind them to brush, it triggered an anticipation of that cool, minty burn.
And once the brain craves the reward, the habit becomes automatic. That is why almost every toothpaste today, and even your shampoo and laundry detergent, is designed to foam or tingle or smell a certain way. The foam doesn't make it clean better, but it satisfies the craving that tells your brain, job done. So, if you want to create a new habit, say going for a run every morning, you can't just rely on willpower. You have to cultivate a craving. Maybe it's the endorphin rush, or maybe it's a specific smoothie you only let yourself have after the run. You have to train your brain to obsess over that reward before you even lace up your shoes. Okay, so we have the habit loop, and we know that cravings drive it. This brings us to a massive question. If these loops are hardwired into our brains and driven by powerful cravings, are we stuck with them? If you have a bad habit, can you simply extinguish it? Well, the short answer is no, but the long answer is the golden rule, and that is where things get really interesting.
Of the habit loop. So the short answer is no. You can't just delete a bad habit. But the long answer, well, that's where we get to what Charles Duhigg calls the golden rule of habit change. And this is the key to everything we've been talking about. The golden rule states that you can't extinguish a bad habit, you can only change it. See, the science shows that once a habit loop is wired into your brain, that specific combination of cue, routine, and reward, it's there forever. It's waiting for the right trigger. That's why someone who quit smoking 20 years ago can still feel a sudden urge if they walk into a smoky bar. The wiring never disappears. But you can override it. The strategy is surprisingly simple, even if it's hard to pull off. To change a habit, you have to keep the old cue, deliver the old reward, but you insert a new routine.
Think of it like reprogramming a glitchy piece of software. You don't throw out the computer, you just rewrite the code in the middle. Let's look at a classic example from the book, smoking. A lot of people assume they smoke because they are addicted to nicotine. And sure, there's a chemical component. But for many people, the habit is driven by a different reward entirely. Maybe the cue is feeling overwhelmed at work. The routine is go outside and smoke. But what's the reward? Is it the nicotine? Or is it the relief of stepping away from your desk, getting some fresh air, and maybe chatting with a friend for 5 minutes? If the reward is actually just stress relief and social connection, you can hack that loop. So the next time you feel that stress, that's your cue. Instead of lighting up, you go for a quick walk around the block, or you go find a colleague to gossip with for 3 minutes. You keep the cue, you keep the reward, but you swap the routine.
Duhigg talks about how this exact principle is the engine behind Alcoholics Anonymous. AA doesn't just demand willpower, it helps people identify the cues that drive their drinking, like anxiety or loneliness, and then gives them a new routine, like going to a meeting or calling a sponsor to get the same reward of companionship and relief. It's about respecting the architecture of your brain. You aren't fighting the urge, you're redirecting it. Now, this sounds great on paper, right? Just swap the routine, simple. But we all know it's not that easy. Sometimes, even when you rewrite the loop, you still slide back. You need something else to make it stick, something that often starts with just one tiny, manageable change. And that brings us to the concept of small wins. So, what exactly is a small win? It is essentially a micro victory, a tiny success that sets a much larger process in motion. And in the world of habit formation, These small wins are the building blocks of what Charles Duhigg calls Keystone Habits. Think about architecture for a second. A keystone is that central, wedge-shaped stone at the very top of an arch. It's the piece that locks all the other stones into place. If you remove it, the whole thing crumbles. But if you secure it, the arch can hold a massive amount of weight. Duhigg argues that some habits act exactly like that stone. They matter more than others. They start a chain reaction, changing other habits that seem completely unrelated. Let's look at a specific example from the book, a 2009 study funded by the National Institutes of Health. They took a group of 1,600 participants and asked them to do one very simple thing: keep a food journal. They had to write down everything they ate, at least one day a week. Now, originally, the researchers just wanted data, but something unexpected happened. The act of writing down their meals became a keystone habit. It created a small win of awareness. The participants started noticing patterns they'd ignored before, like how they always snacked at 10 a.m. or how they never actually ate a real dinner. They didn't just lose weight, they lost twice as much weight as the people who didn't keep a journal. And the fascinating part is, the researchers didn't even force them to go on a diet. The habit of journaling created a structure that naturally spilled over into better eating choices. It's the spillover effect. You change one thing, and it creates momentum. Duhigg gives another example that I absolutely love because it sounds so incredibly trivial: making your bed. Seriously, according to the research Duhigg cites, making your bed every morning is correlated with better productivity, a greater sense of well-being, and believe it or not, stronger skills at sticking to a budget. Now, obviously, smoothing out your sheets doesn't magically make you good at finance, but it starts your day with a small win. You accomplish one task before you've even had your coffee. That small sense of order and discipline triggers a chain reaction that influences how you handle the rest of your day.
The lesson here is that you don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You don't need to fix your diet and your spending and your work ethic all at once. That's a recipe for burnout. Instead, you just need to find your keystone habit. You focus on that one small win and let the momentum do the heavy lifting for you. However, there is a catch. Even if you have the perfect keystone habit and you understand the loop, there will be days when things go wrong, days when you are exhausted, stressed, or just pushed to your limit. To keep that keystone habit in place when the world is fighting against you, you need a very specific resource. Most people think of this resource as a character trait, something you either have or you don't. But Duhigg suggests we've been looking at it all wrong. He argues that this resource is actually more like a muscle, one that can get tired, overworked, and eventually fail if you don't treat it right. And that brings us to the fascinating science of willpower.
It's not just a metaphor. It literally behaves like a bicep or a quadricep. If you run a marathon today, you're going to be sore tomorrow. You might not be able to walk up a flight of stairs. Willpower works the exact same way. If you spend all morning fighting the urge to check Instagram, and then you spend your lunch break holding your tongue while your boss criticizes your work, by the time you get home at 6 p.m., that muscle is exhausted. You have nothing left. That is why you skip the gym. That is why you order the pizza. Duhigg backs this up with one of my absolute favorite studies in the book. It's known as the cookie and radish experiment, conducted by researchers at Case Western Reserve University. Picture this. You are a hungry college student. You haven't eaten all day. You walk into a lab and the air smells like heaven. It smells like fresh, warm, gooey chocolate chip cookies. You sit down at a table. In front of you, there is a bowl of those warm cookies and a bowl of raw, bitter red radishes. Now here is the twist. Half the students are told, go ahead, eat the cookies, but ignore the radishes. The other half, the unlucky half, are told, you can eat the radishes, but you are forbidden from touching the cookies. So the radish group sits there. They are miserable. They're forcing themselves to eat raw vegetables while the smell of chocolate fills their nose. Some of them even pick up a cookie and sniff it, then put it back down. They are using a massive amount of willpower to resist that temptation. After 5 minutes, the researchers take the food away, and give the students a puzzle. They say, "Solve this. It's an intelligence test."
But actually, the puzzle is impossible. It has no solution. The researchers just want to see how long the students will keep trying before they quit. The cookie eaters, who didn't use any willpower earlier, sat there and worked on the puzzle for an average of 19 minutes. They were patient. They kept trying. The radish eaters? They lasted 8 minutes. 8 minutes. That is less than half the time. They got frustrated, they muttered under their breath, and they quit. Why? Because they had already spent their willpower resisting the cookies. Their tank was empty. This is called ego depletion, and it explains so much about our daily lives. This brings us to Starbucks. You might not think of a coffee shop as a high-performance psychological laboratory, but that is exactly what it is. Starbucks realized years ago that their biggest challenge wasn't making coffee, it was emotional labor. It was maintaining willpower. Imagine you are a barista. It's 8 a.m. The line is out the door. People are grumpy, they haven't had their caffeine, and suddenly a customer starts screaming at you because they got soy milk instead of almond milk. In that moment, your willpower muscle is being crushed. Your natural instinct is to fight back or to break down. Starbucks found that when employees' willpower ran out, they started snapping at customers. So they decided to take the burden off the employees' willpower. They turned handling angry customers into a habit loop. They call it the latte method, L-A-T-T-E. It stands for listen, acknowledge, take action, thank, and explain.
So, when a customer starts yelling, the barista doesn't have to think. They don't have to use their willpower to decide what to do. They just trigger the script. Listen to the complaint. Acknowledge it. I hear you, and I know it's frustrating to get the wrong drink. Take action. Let me make you a new one right now. Thank them. Thanks for being patient with us. Explain. We have a new trainee on the bar today. I'll make sure they know for next time. By memorizing this loop, the barista turns a high-stress situation into a rote mechanical process. They preserve their willpower for the rest of their shift. This is the secret weapon Duhigg wants us to learn. We all have those inflection points, moments where we know our pain triggers are going to hit. Maybe it's when you get a stressful email or when your kids won't put on their shoes. If you rely on willpower in that moment, you might fail. The radish muscle might be too tired. Instead, you need to write your own latte method ahead of time. You need to decide now how you will react then. You say to yourself, when I feel stress rising in my chest, I will immediately take 3 deep breaths and ask for a 5-minute break. You preload the decision. You make the willpower automatic. Now, we have covered a lot of ground. We've looked at the cue, routine, reward loop. We've talked about the golden rule of habit change. We've identified keystone habits, and we've learned how to protect our willpower muscle. It is a lot of information. So how do we package this all up and actually apply it to your life starting tomorrow? Let's bring it all home.
Summarize the main mental models: the loop, the golden rule, and keystone habits. The book isn't just a collection of life hacks. It's a manual for taking control of human nature. If we boil it down, we have 3 big pillars. First, you have the loop, the cue, the routine, and the reward. That is the engine of your life. It is the code your brain runs on to save energy. Second, the golden rule. You cannot destroy a bad habit. You can't just delete the software. You have to overwrite it. You keep the old cue and you deliver the old reward, but you swap out the routine. You replace the cookie with the apple or the angry outburst with the deep breath. And third, keystone habits. You don't have to fix everything at once. You just need to find that one small win, making your bed, tracking your food, a 5-minute jog that starts a chain reaction. But here is the most important part. This is where Duhigg leaves us, and it's actually quite profound.
He references a famous speech by the writer David Foster Wallace. There are these 2 young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" The 2 young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, what the hell is water? For most of our lives, habits are the water. They are the invisible environment we swim in. We eat, we sleep, we check our phones, we snap at our spouses. We do it all without thinking, floating along in the current. But reading this book, that is you stepping out of the water. Duhigg makes a very strong point in the final chapter. He compares a sleepwalker who literally has no control over their actions to a gambler who has lost everything. The sleepwalker might be innocent, but the rest of us, we don't get that excuse. Once you understand the habit loop, once you see the cue and the reward, you are no longer just a fish. You are aware of the water.
And that means you now have a choice. William James, the father of American psychology, famously wrote that our life is but a mass of habits. That sounds scary, but it's actually the ultimate freedom. It means that if you can change your habits, you can change your destiny. You now have the tools. You know how the machine works. The only thing left to do is to get to work. If you want to dive deeper into the science and read the full stories, like the one about the sleepwalking killer, or the specifics of the Starbucks training manuals, you really need to pick up the full book. There is a link in the show notes to buy it. That is it for The Power of Habit. Thank you for going on this journey with me. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please make sure you are subscribed. We have another incredible book lined up for the next series of The Last Read, and you won't want to miss it. Until then, watch your cues, choose your rewards, and keep swimming. Goodbye for now.